All right, so giving an anime a 7 out of 10 is not a personal attack on your character, but to the modern anime fan, it might as well be a declaration of war. And I'm not exaggerating. There's actual psychology behind why your brain treats a critical critique or a regular opinion of Jujutsu Kaisen the same way it treats someone insulting your mother. It's called identity fusion. And once you see it, you're not going to be able to unsee it. Here's what this looks like in real life. Every 3 months, a new seasonal anime drops, and within the first 48 hours, the community collectively decides, basically as a hive mind, which 3 of those shows are considered quote unquote the new big 3 or whatever. Think of Demon Slayer, MHA, or Black Clover, when they first came out. Now, here's where it gets a little bit weird. If you walk into a comment section and point out a genuine issue with either of those shows, albeit the pacing is off or character designs are a little bit inconsistent, or whatever, the community doesn't meet you halfway with a good argument or counter argument. They get defensive immediately off rip, and then your critique goes in through one ear and out through the other ear, because they're not listening with their brains, they're listening with their feelings. And look, it's easy to just call this standard internet toxicity and just go on about your day and move on. But saying it's just drama doesn't really explain why it happens. The reality is that the modern seasonal fandom has rewired the way we process information. And your brain's been literally trained to treat an objective analysis as a direct threat to your emotional security. And that's where you just get, people calling you a hater and whatnot. Now, I want to start by saying this. I'm not here to trash on anyone's favorite show, so you niggas can relax. Instead, I want to put the entirety of the community on the table and, attempt to explain the reasons why the modern anime fan completely loses the ability to separate the art from their own ego, basically. And it starts with a concept called identity fusion. All right, so the formal definition might look a little bit dense, so I'll just throw it up on screen for all the intellectuals, but for the rest of us commoners, this is what it means. It's basically when your personal identity gets so tangled up with a particular group, or in this case a show, that your brain stops being able to tell the difference between someone criticized the pacing in Solo Leveling and someone just insulted your intelligence. So, the boundary between you and the thing you love starts to disappear. It just vanishes completely. But think about it like this. 10 to 15 years ago, watching anime was just a hobby. It's something that you check up on every week. It's something that you talk to a couple friends at school about, or at work. That's what it was. That's how it was for me, at least. But today, keeping up with the seasonal charts is an entire subculture where fans don't just watch the show, they live it, they breathe it. It's their everything, basically. From their watch list, their favorite animation studios, to even the custom profile pictures they have on social media. These aren't just preferences anymore, they're uniforms. They're how you signal what social circle you belong to, how smart your taste is, or how valid you are. And when you invest dozens of hours every month defending a specific show on social media, buying the merch, celebrating its rating scores, the product stops being entertainment and it becomes a pillar of your own self-esteem. And that's the fusion, basically. Your brain can't tell the difference between this is a valid critique on a show and this person is attacking who I am as a human being. But now let me show you how this actually plays out. I'll give you some examples, because the translation here is a little bit crazy. In this case, you might say the pacing in Solo Leveling Season 2 feels a little bit off. It feels weird. And an identity-infused fan might hear, you're stupid for wasting 12 weeks of your life watching this garbage. And then another case is, you might say the main character's motivations feel unearned. They hear your personal taste is bad and your favorite character isn't as good as you think it is. And I'm not just making this up. When an identity-infused fan reads a valid critique, their brains fire up the exact same way it would in a physical altercation. Basically a fight. And they're not just analyzing the artistic choices or even the character development anymore. You know, they're in primitive survival mode. You know, they're basically protecting their ego from being attacked. And at that point, this isn't a debate anymore. It's self-defense. But here's where it gets a bit worse, because the psychological weakness isn't just a fan problem anymore. Every single platform is actively exploiting it. Social media turned fandoms into a competitive sport, and the rules say you need an all or nothing mentality, which is stupid to me. In apps like TikTok, X, and even YouTube, they're programmed to maximize engagement. And engagement, what does engagement do? Engagement thrives off of friction. You know, they don't care about a balanced take or a balanced opinion. You know, something like One Piece isn't too long. You know, you're just used to shows ending in 2 seasons because you have a short attention span or something. Is that true? I personally think it is. But something like that is too quiet. You know, that doesn't spark enough of a fight. So the algorithm buries it. You know, instead, the system pushes for polarization. You're forced to claim a show is either flawless, peak fiction, or it's just unwatchable and mid. You know, there's no in between anymore. And think about what that does to your brain over time. You're being told day by day to accept the art as it comes and say whether it's either mid or a masterpiece. You know, there's no nuance. No more the animation is dope, but the story is dog shit. Like, just pick a side and defend it with your life, basically. You know, it's either good or bad, is what I'm saying. And when you live like that long enough, a 7 out of 10, which is literally above average, you know, it's not bad. 7 out of 10 is not bad, which is what I gave Solo Leveling in my last video. Something like that starts to be, it's an insult. I'm stuttering here. And that's because the algorithm never taught you what nuance actually sounds like. And if you think this is just about hurt feelings in the comment section, you're missing a point, because this psychology doesn't just affect fans, it affects what actually gets made. And here's the part that pisses me off the most. What we reward as a fandom is what we get more of. You know, if studios know that they can drop a show with dope animation and an empty ass script, and the community will literally just defend it with their lives, like their lives depend on it, you know, why would they invest in better writing? Like, why would they take risks on well-written characters when a generic power fantasy with a nice fight scene prints money and gets defended by an army of identity-infused fans for free? You know, this is how you get decades of straight garbage isekai. I'm not gonna stop saying that. I'm not gonna stop saying that. We have a surplus of trash isekais. Like, come on, my nigga. Like, literally, like, with absolutely no substance. Like, not because the studios can't write better, but because they don't have to. What incentive do they have to? Like, we're telling them with our wallets, you know, with our engagement, with our defense squads, like, we're literally telling them, don't even bother with the story. Just make it look pretty and we'll handle the rest. And look, I get it. Sometimes you just want to turn your brain off and watch a guy punch things for 20 minutes. I'm not gonna lie, I do that as well. But when did that become the only thing that succeeds? Like, when a show with actual writing, and I'm talking actual writing, and actual character development, and actual world building. And I say this because if you find a show with all 3 of these, save it, because it's a golden nugget. You know, that's just how hard they are to find nowadays. And that's not a healthy industry. That's a dopamine farm, and we're building it. So here's my question for you. Next time you feel like you're just about to explode when someone says that your favorite show is garbage or has bad writing, take a pause and ask yourself, am I about to defend a piece of art, or am I just about to defend my own ego? Because those are 2 different types of fights, and one of them just isn't worth having. And let me know in the comments section below if you ever caught yourself doing this. And if this video made you think and reflect, leave a like and subscribe. And I'll catch y'all boys in the next one.